Okay. Saying we're live. I decided to start a little early. I had it scheduled for the top of the hour, but I was ready now. So I figured we might as well start. I'm just going to wait until I see the video start here on my YouTube app so I know that I'm for sure live. Okay, there it is. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. How's everybody doing? Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, do all that stuff YouTubers ask. Follow me on Telegram. Follow me on Twitter. The links are in the bio. So let's go ahead and get started. Obviously, I'm sure most of you have heard by now that Russia launched a pretty massive attack, like I said in the title of the video, in response to Ukraine's attack on the Crimean Bridge. Right, the suicide bombing, very terrorist thing to do. But Russia made it very clear for months now that any attack on the Crimean Bridge would be met with harsh retaliation from them, and that's exactly what's happened. Right, Russia responded quite harshly. We're going to go over some of the footage out there, but it's already being reported. It's been being reported for hours now that power in a lot of major Ukrainian cities are down. Kiev, Lvov, Kharkov. Right, power is out across much of Ukraine. The internet is down. Let's go over some of the videos here. I won't be able to show them in the full screen because for whatever reason, when I do that, you guys can't see them. But you can see them in the small screen here. A lot of it's from Battlefield Insights. They're very good. This is a pretty funny video. A BBC report gets interrupted by a missile flying over. Of course, the missile wasn't targeting them, and they weren't really in direct danger from it, but they still got scared, which is pretty funny. But we'll scroll through here. 47 air-launched missiles in the last few minutes, right? That was at 2:08 a.m. I mean, that's a lot. This altogether, there's probably around 100 missiles launched, plus the Iranian kamikaze drones that were involved. This is a huge attack. This video is pretty crazy. You can see right there that huge fireball in the city center. Now, one thing to clarify is that these aren't just unguided munitions that the Russians are like lobbing. Like a lot of normal people don't really understand that modern day munitions are precision guided, right? They're not just lobbing shells towards Kiev or towards Lvov or towards whatever they're attacking. These are precision guided munitions that are able to strike within centimeters of where they want to hit, right? So keep that in mind. Everything that's hit is pretty much they want to hit. We'll keep scrolling here. That's why when people say, "Oh, they're targeting civilian areas," why are they doing that? Why would they waste their munitions to do something that isn't strategic, right? Terrorizing civilians is not strategic. But people will still claim the Russians do it. And it's just silly. A few months ago, we were hearing that the Russians ran out of cruise missiles, right? We were hearing that they were going to run out of cruise missiles and not be able to make any more, right? What happened, right? We see cruise missiles launched almost every day, and now we just saw almost 100 launched in the span of a couple hours. It doesn't seem to me like that's a country that's running out of missiles, but we'll continue going here. This says the X-101 cruise missile was used. I'm not very familiar with that. I'm familiar with the caliber. Maybe those are the same, different names, but that's the first I'm seeing of the X-101. Here are some interesting numbers here. The number of missile hits in Ukraine at the moment. This was at 2:15 a.m. Central Time. So 47 in the Nikolaev region, 60 were counted in Kiev, 15 in Lvov, 27 in Vinnytsia, 20 in Kharkov, and 15 in Odessa. It's a lot. That's a lot. And that isn't even including the kamikaze drones that the Russians are using, right? Reportedly, they attacked many Ukrainian military positions along the front lines at the same time that this missile attack was being carried out. And much of those attacks on the frontline Ukrainians were done with the use of the kamikaze drones that the Russians have been using. We'll keep going here. Wish I could click on this in full screen then, but I haven't. That's a very large explosion there. I haven't figured out how to do that and how to keep you guys seeing it. But yeah, like I've been saying, if you follow me on Telegram, you know that I've been saying since the attack on the Crimean Bridge that it's likely that Russia will respond by taking out Ukraine's energy infrastructure. That was my bet. I said that they would take out Ukraine's energy infrastructure, especially around Kiev. And that seems to be exactly what they did. Now, I thought it would be more isolated. I didn't think it would be as large of a retaliation as this has been. But I was wrong, right? Massive retaliation. I thought it'd be smaller and mostly centered on energy infrastructure, but no. It was very large. Yes, they did take out much energy infrastructure, but also they hit government buildings. Apparently, they hit the German consulate, but it seems like that was not on accident, but it seems like the German consulate was no longer in use. Some people report that Zelensky's office was hit, but obviously he wasn't there. The Ukrainians were well aware that the Russians were going to retaliate, so they were somewhat prepared. They had important people out of buildings and in protection, right? Keep going here. This is a thermal power plant in Kiev being struck, right? Targeting the energy infrastructure. Here are some of those kamikaze drones. I wish you could hear it, but I don't think you can even hear. Yeah, I don't think that goes through when I click it on the stream for whatever reason. Oh, maybe it did. Can you guys hear and see that? Somebody comment and let me know if you wouldn't mind. But we'll continue on. More attacks here in Sumy. Explosions in Odessa, right? This was a very, very large attack. We're not even really halfway through the video so far from this morning. I've been seeing this building in a lot of videos. I'm not sure what that building is, but the one with all the glass right there. I've seen that several times today now. Internet infrastructure in Ukraine experiencing mass outages. Not surprising there, right? That's what they're targeting, right? Targeting the critical infrastructure. Somewhere in Kiev. Oh, it looks like this is coming through on the stream. Good. Cars damaged. There definitely was collateral damage, right? You can't carry out a attack this large in populated cities and not have collateral damage. But obviously, the Russians are not targeting civilians, right? That might be a narrative you hear from Western media in the coming hours, is that the coming day, is that they were targeting civilians. But like I already said, why would the Russians do that? The Russians have clear objectives that they're trying to accomplish. Targeting and terrorizing civilians would be counterintuitive, right? It wouldn't be efficient, right? Why are we going to use these precision guided munitions, which the West claims that they're running out of? So let's believe the West for a second. Let's believe the media narrative that Russia's running out of missiles. If Russia was running out of missiles, why would they waste their missiles on civilian targets? Right? Their own narratives contradict each other. It doesn't make sense. But Russia is not targeting civilians. Obviously, like I said, when you launch an attack of this scale in populated areas, there's going to be civilian collateral damage. And there are some collateral damage numbers down towards the bottom that we'll get to. But we'll keep going through here. Watch this video. It's curious that something fell in the middle of the street, right? Like I'm saying, these are precision guided munitions, so it's strange that one would do so much damage to the middle of the street, assuming it was done with a missile. Not completely sure why they're so distressed. Obviously, it was probably scary for them. But it doesn't look like there's civilian casualties here. I imagine they would have been shown in the video if there were. There was some blur in that second one, but still. Ukrainian military report, quote, Nikolaevskaya area, attention. Planes are flying low from Chaplinsk in our direction. A lot. Air defenses on standby. 2 missiles intercepted above Odessa. That's something that is interesting. Is the Ukrainians did intercept some of these missiles. A lot of attacks, the Ukrainians don't try to intercept the missiles, and that's likely because they don't want to give away their air defense system. Right? Once you intercept a missile, now the enemy knows where your missile defense systems are, and they can target them. So a lot of forces will save those missile defense systems for legitimate attacks that actually pose a legitimate threat, and obviously, a massive attack like this one was one of them. Lvov has lost power, according to the mayor of Lvov. It's the case with many Ukrainian cities. This was an interesting video here because it shows a bridge getting struck, and people thought, "Oh no, run away, guy!" People thought that this is a retaliation to Ukraine attacking a bridge, but apparently, if you read right here, the building of the European Union advisory assistance is located nearby to this bridge, and that's likely what the Russians were targeting. which I was waiting for. Right, we know that there's CIA, small little CIA bases in Ukraine and whatnot. We know that the U.S. is essentially doing the intelligence and the ordering for the Russian military, or I'm sorry, the Ukrainian military, right? So I've been waiting for Russia to start hitting those, CIA outposts and MI6 and whatever other Western intelligence services are there. Zelensky says Russia is trying to wipe us off the face of the earth. That's interesting, right? Zelensky's government has been trying to wipe Russians off the face of the earth, or at least off the face of Ukraine for 8 years, the better part of 8 years now, right? So no, Russia's not trying to wipe Ukraine off the face of the earth. They're trying to wipe, the Nazi influence on their military and their government out off the face of the earth, right? They've made that very clear. But Zelensky's a clown and an actor. We all know that. Keep going here. Ukrainian hospitals have switched to backup generators. That's really unfortunate, right? You take out a power grid, that's going to affect it, right? Hospitals need huge amounts of electricity. And, if people in critical condition and things like that, they rely on electricity. So if there's no electricity, people in hospitals are going to die. And that's very, very unfortunate. But that's sort of the situation Ukraine has made for itself, right? The Ukrainian government and military has made life for their citizens very, very, very difficult by allowing themselves to become, full of Nazis in leadership and essentially just a way to poke Russia, right? Traffic lights aren't working. I'm sure that's not of a high priority right now. Ukrainian Telegram channels have been going crazy about the damage done to the FSB, right? The Ukrainian Security Service. The pro-Ukrainian Telegrams are saying have been very stressed out about that, saying massive damage has been done. And one was saying that, we're seeing images of a playground that was struck by Russia on all news, but we're not seeing anything about all the great FSB people that were lost, right? And that's interesting, right? That shows you that this attack was massive in scale, that even the Ukrainian-backed or Ukraine's pro-Ukrainian Telegram outlets are complaining about losses. Video from a highway here. We're almost through all these videos. Reportedly view of Samsung offices in Kiev. Interesting. I'm sure we'll get more information in the coming hours on what exactly was targeted and why by the Russians. You can choose to believe as much or as little of it as you'd like. But this was multiple waves, right? Multiple waves. The first wave seemed to have been air launched, and then the Russian Navy and the Black Sea began launching them. And right, this was a massive, massive attack. I'm going to show you the U.S. attack on Baghdad at the beginning of U.S. invasion just for a second. So remember everything you're seeing here, the scale of the attack. Remember everything you're seeing, the strikes. And then I'm going to show you what the U.S. did in Baghdad in a moment. Civilians going to the metro, I don't blame them. They're scared and rightfully scared. One thing I want to comment on is look how nice this metro is, right? I've never seen a metro that nice in the U.S. even. Ukraine's the poorest country in Europe, and they have nicer metros, right? When I went to New York, I rode the subway, and it was a disgusting experience. This looks kind of the metro that is looks kind of nice, but I don't blame these people. They're scared, rightfully. So yeah, 83 cruise missiles launched at Ukraine in the last 2.5 hours. I'm not sure where they get that number from, but still, that's massive. This is interesting. The president of Belarus, Lukashenko, and Putin agreed to deploy a joint regional group of troops. Apparently, a good amount of Russian troops have moved in to Belarus, and this is after Ukraine the other day blew up bridges that were connecting Belarus and Ukraine. Ukraine is saying that Belarus plans on attacking them and imminently and whatnot. And the roads that remain, Belarus claims the roads and railways that will remain intact between Ukraine and Belarus have been mined by the Ukrainians. It's not surprising, right? If the Ukrainians were truly expecting an attack, they would mine it. So that's probably pretty likely. Lukashenko said the Crimean Bridge retaliation will seem like flowers to Zelensky if Ukraine touches at least 1 meter of Belarus with its dirty hands. Moldova says that 3 Russian cruise missiles crossed the country's airspace. Watch this video here. It's pretty scary if you're just a civilian that flies over you. German mainstream media is where we're getting that claim that the German consulate in Kiev was damaged. It's very possible, right? There's no electricity and water in the Chinov region and Kiev region. Obviously, forgive me for not pronouncing that correctly. Some loud music they have in the car. It looks like a missile struck right in front of them. Oh, another one. That's pretty scary. If I was on the road, that would worry me. I'd probably start backing up. I'm not sure why they're all frozen. Oh, there we go. There we go. Took a few seconds. That's unfortunate for the civilians for sure. But that's the situation their government's made for them, right? This is what they have to deal with in their daily lives because of the actions of their government and their military. Look at this. It's so silly. I mean, they didn't even take the bridge out, right? Was this worth it? Was doing some minor damage, some short-term damage worth this? I wouldn't think so if I was a Ukrainian citizen. Here's a list of the cities that were hit. Obviously, Kiev and Kharkov. I don't know. I'm not going to read all of them, but you can see them here. List of some of the infrastructure that was hit. A lot of power plants, total loss of power in Lvov, Zhytomyr. I'm pretty sure Zhytomyr is where Zelensky's from. Could be wrong, but I think that's the case. Sumy, Kharkov, that one, Poltava, Ternopil, Lutsk, right? Partial loss of power and full partial loss of water supply basically all over Ukraine. Here's some more footage. I can't really see it there, but you can hear it. Putin accused Kiev of trying to undermine one of the sections of the Turkish steam gas pipeline, right? The Ukrainians have gone to full-on terrorism at this point, right? Suicide bombing bridges and things, and now attacking pipelines like their handlers did, right? The British and U.S. handlers did the same type of stuff with the Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2, one of the greatest acts of terrorism in history, really. Here's some statements from Putin. In the morning, a massive strike was carried out with high-precision weapons on Ukrainian infrastructure, energy infrastructure, military command, and communications. He went on to say, in the event of new attempts of terrorist attacks on the territory of the Russian Federation, the responses will be tough and correspond to the level of threats. And we see what they mean by that, right? The Crimean Bridge resulted in this massive attack. Imagine if the Ukrainians carried out a larger terrorist type attack, and the response would be even more massive. So that's something to keep in mind. Supply of electricity from Sweden to Poland has stopped due to an accident. Interesting. Well, we're through a lot of the videos here. Explosions hit a military training ground in the Odessa region. This says Ukrainian power grid deficiency reaches 1 billion watts. According to various Ukrainian media, Ukraine announced suspension of exports of electricity to other countries and imposed restrictions on power use. Blackouts expected during peak hours all over the country. And that's in regions with partial electricity, right? Obviously, there's some regions with none currently. 71 structures in Kiev city alone were destroyed this morning. I'm not sure where that. Oh, he says Ukrainian authorities, or they say Ukrainian authorities. Interesting. I shared this video on my Telegram, actually. You can look how precision guided this munition is. For example, it flies in and it's going to hit exactly where it wants to hit. This is something people need to understand when they're being told by the media that Russia is bombing indiscriminately and targeting civilians. Look how precision guided this is, right? They're not wasting precision guided munitions for non-strategic purpose on non-strategic attacks, right? Like hitting civilians would be. I'm always surprised by how relatively small of an explosion takes place from these cruise missiles. I always expect something bigger, and it's relatively small, at least to me, right? I don't know what I'm basing that off of. I don't have fighting experience, but Ukrainian media is claiming that this playground was struck by a Russian missile. It's possible, but once again, why? Why would they do that? Clearly, there's damage here. You can't refute that there's damage here. I don't know where this is from, this video, all of that. The validity of that statement in this video is in question. I don't believe that the Russians just targeted a playground to target a playground. Because, like we said, why would they waste precious munitions on such a non-strategic thing? Here are the casualty numbers. This is according to Ukrainian media. TRUXA. I'm not 100% sure of that outlet, but let's just read what they have to say. They say at least 11 people were killed and another 89 were wounded after Russia launched a massive wave of strikes targeting cities across Ukraine. That seems like a relatively low number to me, right? We see the scale of this attack, how large it was, and even Ukrainian media are the ones saying that 11 people, only 11 were killed, which is tragic. I'm sorry to lose 11 people, assuming they were civilians, and 89 were wounded. That's very tragic. That's very unfortunate, especially when you consider hospitals might now be out of operation due to blackouts. But that's quite low, to me at least. We saw the scale of that attack; it's quite low. Let me show you another video real quick. First, let me check on are there any comments? There appear to be comments. The Ukraine regime is officially a terrorist group. 100%. You reap what you sow. Yep, that's what we're seeing. That's what we're seeing for sure. Oh yes, remind me again what Ukraine said about the children going to school. Exactly, right? Ukraine said that Ukraine said to the people of Donetsk and Lugansk that our children will go to school and live happy lives, and your children will cower in shelters and bunkers. Exactly, 100%. So I just showed you all the videos here on Battlefield Insights of Russia strikes. You saw the scale. You see Ukrainian media, Ukrainian. So that's a point against interest for me, right? Because obviously I'm much more supportive of the Russian side. So by quoting Ukrainian media, that's a point against interest for me. Ukrainian media saying 11 people were killed and another 89 wounded. Seems relatively low. Let me show you what how the U.S. carries out strikes like this. This is in Baghdad in 2003. I think 11 people were killed right there alone. I mean, we'll wrap it up there. But I mean, look at that. That is just it's literally raining from the sky. The bombs are literally raining from the sky. That's in Baghdad, right? And we saw what the massive attack from Russia was quite limited, right? When you compare it to that attack at Baghdad, right? How many civilians do you think died in those bombings when there were literally bombs raining from the sky? I'm going to go with far more than 11 and far more than 89 wounded, right? So I wouldn't believe much of what the U.S. and the media has to say, especially the media. I've seen you. I'm sure you've all seen the clip of after the U.S. was invading Iraq of people of the media. I believe it was Brian Williams on NBC. He said, "I'm in awe at the beauty of our weapons." It's something that's always stuck with me. It's such an insane thing to say. You see bombs literally falling from the sky across an entire city, a city like Baghdad. Baghdad's a massive city, and there's bombs literally falling from the sky. And his thought was not, "Oh my God, look at this atrocity that's being committed on the people of Baghdad." His thought was, "I'm in awe by the beauty of our weapons." I mean, that's a depraved thing to say, a completely depraved thing to say. Did I share anything on the Telegram worth sharing here? Oh, this is interesting. Map reportedly showing confirmed strikes against critical infrastructure. So you can see here almost every single major city, Kiev, Kharkov, Odessa, Lvov over here, right? So massive strikes, massive strikes. Of course, this is all Russia, right? This is all now Russia. So you don't see many strikes there. Although the strikes, like I mentioned, Russia says that they also strike frontline positions, Ukrainian frontline positions, and the front lines are around this area. So there were probably some strikes here, but of smaller scale, right? More like those suicide kamikaze drones we've been seeing the Russians use. But massive attack today, this morning, last night, depending on where you are, by the Russians. And like somebody in the comments said, the Ukrainians are going to reap what they sow, and 100%, right? The Russians have made that clear to everyone. If you attack us, we are going to attack you harshly. And that's understandable. What country would not do that? Find me any country that wouldn't do the exact same thing. Zaktimor here struck. I believe that's Zelensky's hometown. I don't know why I'm pretty sure, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. It's not really relevant. I just find it interesting. Zelensky himself said that Russia is destroying the entire Ukrainian power grid. I actually believe that statement from him. It's exactly what I suspected. I suspected that would be the exact retaliation by the Russians in response to the attack on the Crimean Bridge. But this is what's going to happen. If the Ukrainians continue to attack sovereign Russia, which Crimea is sovereign Russia, you can't really argue with that. If they continue to do that, that's what will happen. And that's why it's so dangerous for us in the U.S. supplying these terrorists with weapons, right? These Nazi terrorists. That's what Ukraine is, right? They're leaders. I'm not saying everyone in Ukraine is a Nazi. I'm saying that the leadership of the military and the leadership of the government, it's full of Nazis, right? We just saw the other day. I could find it on Twitter for us, but the other day, right? The head, essentially Ukraine's Secretary of Defense, is walking around and he has this diamond bracelet on, and in one of the diamonds, several of the diamonds is an engraved swastika. Right. So, I mean, that's who we're dealing with here. And if we continue to supply them with arms, they're going to use those arms to do terrorist activities. And at what point will Russia say, you know what, enough is enough? We know what facilities you guys are using to give these arms to these terrorists that are attacking us. We know exactly where they're coming from. We're going to start striking your facilities in Poland, your facilities in Germany. We're going to start striking your facilities involved. And then at that point, now what's the United States going to do? If Russia attacks a NATO base, what's the United States going to do? They're probably going to attack back, and then we all die, right? We all die a 5 million degree death if that happens. Oh, but we got to avoid that, right? We have to stop providing these people with weapons. It's very, very dangerous. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for now while I find this tweet. But I mean, it's incredibly dangerous to continue providing these terrorists with advanced weapons, right? It's not just like guns and ammunition. No, HIMARS. Now they're talking ATACMs and all this other ridiculous stuff. Let me start sharing the screen again. I wanted to show this. Look at these Ukrainian civilians. Some of the Ukrainian civilians are definitely more radicalized than others, but look at them. They made a stamp out of the attack on the Crimean Bridge, which was a piece of civilian infrastructure. Yes, the military uses it. They especially use the railroad that was right above, and that seems to have been the target. Right, for you guys, I'm sure saw the truck that exploded on the Crimean Bridge. It appears their target was specifically the train that was passing above on the railway, full of fuel tankers, which they did ignite several of the fuel tankers. That seemed to have been the main target. Bridges are actually quite hard to blow up. I've learned that during this conflict, that it's not easy to blow up a bridge, right? Because bridges are literally made to shake and flex and take shock. So unless you take out most of the supports of a bridge, it's very hard to destroy it. It's very, very hard to destroy it. So there's no way the Ukrainians thought they were going to destroy the bridge with their suicide truck, right? They were trying to damage the fuel tankers on the rail line above, which the Russian military uses to move fuel and equipment and other things. That was the main target. And they did some damage, but it appears to be operational again. So once again, I asked the question, was it worth it? Was that little tiny inconvenience to the Russians, was that worse what you're now experiencing? If I was a citizen of Ukraine, I would say no. I would be if I was a citizen of Ukraine, I'd be very, very upset with my government for 8 years now, just like the people of Donetsk and Lugansk were. But even if I was someone who supported the Ukrainians after the 2014 Maidan coup, I'd still be pissed right now. Well, I'd probably be fighting, right? So all men, 18 to 55, are pretty much having to fight in Ukraine. Here's a photo of people of the Donbass, Lugansk, right? Look at these children. This is what the Ukrainians said. The Ukrainian leadership said, our children will live free, happy lives. Your children will live cowering in a basement. That's pretty much their exact words. And that's exactly what they did to those people. There is some other stuff I'd like to show here. Oh, here we go. This fella right here in the middle of it. I'm pretty sure he's like Ukraine's essentially Secretary of Defense. He's a general, right? And he's, of course, been praised in the United States. Let's take a look at this picture, right? Notice that flag up there. Does that look questionable to you? And then look at this bust right here. You know who that is? That's Stepan Bandera, right? Man who's responsible for hundreds of thousands of murders, right? Stepan Bandera led the forces that murdered hundreds of thousands of people in Nazi-occupied Ukraine, right? These people view this man, a Nazi, as a hero, right? He's recognized as the hero of Ukraine in the Ukrainian Constitution. The Ukrainian Constitution has Nazism enshrined. It enshrines Nazism. There's a video that I would like to show all of you. It isn't this one, but this is interesting. Trump saying we must demand the immediate negotiation of a peaceful end to the war in Ukraine, or we will end up in World War III. He's completely correct. We already are in World War III. And there will be nothing left of our planet, all because stupid people didn't have a clue. They don't understand the power of nuclear. Let's actually listen to him say it. It's possible the sound isn't coming through. I just noticed that. But either way, you see what he said right there. He's completely correct, right? We're already in World War III. This is World War III. You have NATO fighting. Sorry, I forgot to unmute my mic. I'm not sure if the sound was coming through on there for the video, but you see what he said right there. He's completely correct. We already are in World War III, right? We have NATO fighting Russia. That's World War III. We have NATO fighting Russia, and now we have the United States trying to fight China over Taiwan. We're in World War III. It might be an early stage. Hopefully, it doesn't get much past this stage. But I definitely see the argument that we're in World War III, that Vucic, right? Vucic, the leader of Serbia, made that point. I am trying to find the video that I wanted. Oh, this is what I wanted to show, right? So here's this bracelet from that general. You can see right here. Right there is a swastika, right? Obviously, you've all seen this picture 100 times. Let's find the picture of the man walking. Funny. This is funny. This was humorous. Oh, I liked a lot of things on Twitter. I didn't realize that. Here we go. This fella. This tweet says, nothing to see here, just Ukraine's head of the armed forces wearing a diamond swastika bracelet, right? You see the bracelet right here, his right arm. And then when you zoom in, right, look at that. What is that right there? What's that funny little symbol? How are we gonna play that one off, right? So that's who we're dealing with in Ukraine. And whenever Western media says, oh, it's just a few people, that's a Russian talking point, it's just a few people, that's being overplayed. No, it's not. These people are Nazis. This is a fact, right? It's in the Ukrainian Constitution, right? Stepan Bandera is recognized as the hero of Ukraine. He has a holiday. They just celebrated it back in January, had massive parades, had banners of him hanging up. Ukraine is a country where the political and military leadership likes Nazis. They are Nazis. This is a fact. Russia's not making that up. Russia's going to stop it, thankfully, because someone needed to before it festered too much, right? And who put these Nazis in charge, right? It's not like they were democratically elected. It's not like they put together a movement, ran campaigns, and were elected by the Ukrainian people. No, they were installed by the United States. They were installed by NATO in the events of what is called Maidan, right? It was a coup. Some people call it a revolution, but it was a coup where they overthrew the government that was in power, the democratically elected government. They overthrew it, and they installed a new one that was friendly to NATO and are full of Nazis. And the guy commenting with the alphabet that I can't read. I'm sorry, I can't read her name, but he said Nuland did it. Right, exactly. Victoria Nuland was the United States ambassador to Ukraine at the time in 2014, and there's leaked phone calls where she's on the phone and they're literally picking the next president of Ukraine, right? They say, what do they say? They say Yats is the guy. She says Yats is the guy, talking about I forget his name, but the guy that took over right after 2014. And since we've had since the start of the operation, it's Milorad. Milorad? I hope I'm saying that right. I'm sorry if I'm not. I'm from the middle of America, so forgive me. But anyways, yeah, Nuland admitted to it in the phone call. They literally picked the next president. Since we've had Poroshenko, right, former president of Ukraine, saying that Ukraine never intended on following what was laid out in the Minsk agreements, right? You had the first Minsk agreement, the second Minsk agreement. They were brokered by the French and the Germans, and Ukraine signed on to it. Ukraine and Russia both signed on to it. Ukraine said, we will follow what's put forward in these documents. And essentially what it was is that they would give increased autonomy to Donbass, right, Donetsk and Lugansk, and they wouldn't continue to persecute people for just speaking Russian, right? The Ukrainian government passed a law banning the use of the Russian language in public life, right? You weren't allowed to speak Ukrainian. It's on the street, in the post office, at school. You weren't allowed to speak Russian on the street, in the post office, at school. They banned it, right? And so the Minsk agreement said, okay, we'll get rid of that policy, and we'll give these people some increased levels of autonomy. But Ukraine never did it, right? Literally like a month after they signed on to the Minsk agreements, you had John McCain visit Ukraine, U.S. Senator, where he said he was at a rally where he gave that speech, and he said, the United States is with you, I am with you, the free world is with you, we're going to go on the offensive. He talked about we're going to go on the offensive, we're going to go attack Donbass, we're going to go attack the Russian-backed separatists. And this is right after Ukraine just signed the Minsk agreements. This is right after Ukraine said, we're going to stop attacking these people. They agreed to it. They signed on the paper. They agreed to it in the most legally binding way that you could agree to something, and they immediately broke it. They had no intention of following it. And the former president of Ukraine, Poroshenko, has said that, right? He has since come out and said that since the start of Russia's operation. And it's disgusting, right? You have a genocidal regime in Ukraine, and we've had that for years. And that's why Russia launched their operation. Russia didn't launch their operation because Putin is some madman who woke up one day and decided, I want to bring back the Soviet Union. I'm going to go get back the Soviet Union, right? No, he didn't do that. And by the way, the Soviet Union wasn't just Russia expanded. No, the Soviet Union was an agreement between many countries, the leader of which was Russia, right? The global superpower was Russia, but it was other countries as well, Belarus, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, we can go on and on, Poland. And these countries had levels of autonomy. As a matter of fact, Belarus and Ukraine had their own seats at the UN when the Soviet Union existed. They were the only states that they were the only states other than Russia, member states of the Soviet Union other than Russia, that had seats at the UN, right? So what was my point? I guess I kind of forgot my point there. I got off track, but anyways, we're dealing with very radical people. Oh, my point is Putin didn't wake up one day and just decide that he wanted to attack Ukraine because he's some madman. No, they're doing this because there's a legitimate Nazi issue in Ukraine. There are Russians being killed. Ukraine is being used as cannon fodder to try to hurt Russia, right? NATO is using Ukraine to kill Russians, as many as they can. First, it was civilians. They've been trying to get Russia to do this. They were trying to provoke Russia for the better part of 8 years, and Russia spent that better part of 8 years being diplomatic, signing things like the Minsk agreement, saying we have to solve this diplomatically. And Russian people are getting upset about that, right? The Communist Party of Russia, which is the second largest communist party in the world outside of China, who is the first, that party was calling for an operation like what we're seeing like 6 years ago. Right, so the people of Russia, many people of Russia were getting quite fed up with the government's approach to Ukraine. They wanted something similar to this military operation much sooner. And Vladimir Putin, who is a genius, right? I don't mean to stroke off Vladimir Putin here, but he is clearly a genius by every measure. He said, no, we're going to do this diplomatically. We're not going to get provoked. That's what they want. They want to provoke us. And after 8 years, after the better part of 8 years, they said, okay, we're going to have to do this. And they finally did launch an operation after literally being pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed at every turn. They were trying to prevent this, but they've since launched an operation to denazify and demilitarize Ukraine, right? And people try to downplay the U.S. and NATO influence in Ukraine. No, NATO was literally training Ukraine's military. Ukraine's military was armed and trained by NATO since 2014 to fight Russia. We know this for a fact. The documents that were leaked by I forget the organization, but we know this to be a fact, right? NATO was training a battalion of Ukrainian troops like every 55 days. They were doing this for several years. So I did the math the other day. It ended up being somewhere in 20 battalions, right? So Ukraine had a NATO armed, NATO trained military. A NATO armed, NATO trained military in Ukraine, right? Ukraine's military was at the same level of Germany, France. Ukraine's military was the strongest in Europe outside of Russia. If Ukraine decided to launch a war against Poland or France or Germany, Ukraine would have won. Ukraine would have won that war. That's how capable their military was. And this shouldn't be surprising to people that are big defenders of the U.S. and the U.S. military, right? If you believe that the U.S. military and NATO is this great power, then you shouldn't be surprised that they were able to turn Ukraine into this, right? I mean, that's exactly what they did. That's exactly what they did. You don't need any documents to know that's obvious. Exactly. It is obvious, but some people will say, oh, where are the documents? I won't believe it unless you show me documents. And then, of course, you show them the documents and they say, oh, that's made by the Russians. It's propaganda. They're not trying to listen. There's a lot of not serious people out there, especially in the media and in the government. They're not. These are stupid people. They work for the military industrial complex. And that's who's benefiting from this the most in the West, right? Is Lockheed Martin and Raytheon and L3 Harris and all these companies that are making HIMARS, and they're making the weapons. They're making huge profits. When the United States gives half of their javelin supply to Ukraine, and when the EU is giving huge amounts of arms to Ukraine, Germany just said that if war broke out, they would only have ammunition for a couple of days, 1 week at the most, right? 1 week of ammunition is what Germany is down to, right? So what are they going to do? What's Germany and the United States, when they give all these arms to Ukraine, how are they going to resupply, right? They're going to go and they're going to buy new arms from Lockheed Martin. They're going to go buy new arms from L3 Harris. And these companies are going to make massive amounts of money. And, oh, by the way, Europe's going to be devastated, right? Europe is no longer going to have gas, right? They're not going to have gas. They're not going to have electricity. So if I'm Ford, if I'm Chevy, if I'm GM, if I'm any American company that has a European competitor, I'm ecstatic right now, right? Because they're going to die. Those companies aren't going to be able to produce more goods. Now, some of those companies have factories in China, so maybe they will. But for the most part, those companies are going to go under. I'm going to go in and be able to buy up Europe, just like after World War II and World War I, but especially just after World War II, when Europe was devastated, right? All of Europe was devastated. The U.S. got to go in and just swallow up as much of Europe as they could. All of Western Europe, they got to just swallow it up. This is ours. We essentially own all of this now. And they lended money to Europe to rebuild, but they got to control how it was rebuilt, right? They got to control the conditions on which the money was lended. If you don't follow our conditions, we won't lend you money, and you'll be kept in a poor, disheveled state. And that's what they did. And they lended huge amounts of money. You can look it up. What's his name plan? The Marshall Plan, right? Go ahead and look it up and look at some of the terms that were involved. For example, one that I always point out is the U.S., in order to get money from the Marshall Program, the U.S. demanded that the recipient countries drop their backing of the Nuremberg trials, right? The Nuremberg trials could have gone on a lot longer, and a lot more former Nazi Germans could have been convicted. But no, the U.S. didn't like that because they wanted to use those Nazis, right? Obviously, the most famous example is Werner von Braun, who is a rocket scientist who ended up leading the Apollo program. And but many other examples, right? Look at the first head of NATO. The first head of NATO, well, not the first head, but one of the first higher ups of NATO was a former Nazi, right? He was a former high-ranking Nazi in Germany. And when NATO was first created, the first head, I forget who his name was, but the first head said the goal is to keep the U.S. in, Russia out, and Germany down, right? That's the goal here. Keep the U.S. in, Russia out, and Germany down. And why is that? It's because the U.S. and Britain and Operation Paperclip, exactly. It's because the U.S. and Britain have always been afraid of Germany and Russia, realizing that they have common interests, right? If Germany and Russia ally, then the U.S. and the British feared that, okay, we would lose our grip on Europe because those two are so powerful that if they were to combine forces, then it's over for us. And that's what they've always tried to prevent. That's what World War II was about. They turned World War II. What the U.S. and NATO has done in Ukraine, turning Ukraine into a Nazi state, a Nazi military, a Nazi government, hostile to Russia. That's very similar to what they did in World War II, right? The Nazis in Germany didn't really win any elections, right? They were largely installed. They were backed by the U.S. and the British. They were backed by U.S. and British money. And once the Nazis did come to power, how were they able to build that military? Where did they get the aluminum and the rubber and the oil and all the raw materials necessary to build up that massive military that they built from World War II. They didn't get that from Germany. Germany doesn't have all that. They got it from American and British companies, right? The Aluminum Company of America. Which one was Rockefeller's oil company? That one, ExxonMobil, right? That's where they were getting these supplies from. So the U.S. has done this for over 100 years. They've been doing this for over 100 years in Europe, trying to fight Russia, right? It's all directed at Russia. Russia's their enemy because Russia is this massive country with all these raw materials, and they're not coastal for the most part, right? That's something to understand. It's the people in the West, the people in Wall Street, the people in the city of London, they're Atlanticists. They want to control the sea routes, the sea trade routes. And so land-based trade routes are bad for them, right? And you look at Eurasia, it's this massive land area with huge countries, mainly Russia, right? Not very coastal, and they hate that because it's hard for them to control a non-coastal area, and this is why they've targeted Russia. Russia has all these resources that those American companies don't get to control. It used to be that they kind of did, right? When the Russian Empire existed, there were disagreements between the British and the Russian Empire and the Americans and the Russian Empire. But for the most part, the Russian Empire was able to get along, and the other Western powers were able to get along with the Russian Empire, right? You even had Teddy Roosevelt, who won a Nobel Prize because he negotiated an end to the Russian and Japanese war that was going on, I believe, in the early 1900s. And so my point is, they were fine with the Russian Empire, but it's a free Russia that they don't like. It's a Russia where the people have more power. It's a Russia where the resources go to the people, right? The Russian Empire had one steel mill. When the Russian Empire was overthrown by the Bolsheviks, it had one steel mill. One. Right? How many steel mills did it have 20 years later? Far more than one, right? Enough to beat the Nazis, enough to make enough steel, make enough tanks, enough to make enough productive capacity to beat the Nazis, right? So, and also in the 1990s, right, after the fall of the Soviet Union and Boris Yeltsin came to power, the Americans and the British Wall Street, they loved Russia then, right? When the Russian people were poor and starving and they weren't going to school, it's estimated that like 10 million Russians didn't go to school when in their childhood after the fall of the Soviet Union, massive amount, right? They were addicted to drugs. Drug addiction went through the roof. People were dying from starvation, from preventable, not only preventable illness, but illness that was treatable. They didn't have to be dying from these things, but they were, because their country had literally been sold to Wall Street, sold to the city of London. And the West liked Russia then, right? Boris Yeltsin and Bill Clinton were best of friends, right? They hung out at the White House and they got drunk and they ordered pizza, right? Isn't that the story? So that's my point, is the West wants a poor, broken Russia. They don't like a strong, independent Russia where the people of Russia are living good lives. They hate that. That's why they hate Vladimir Putin. When Vladimir Putin first came to power, they weren't very against him, right? Because he was kind of working with them. If you remember when Putin first came to power, he tried to get Russia into the EU. He asked NATO if they could join, and NATO said no, and the EU said no, right? NATO said no, because what's the goal of NATO? The first head of NATO made it very clear. The goal is to keep the Americans in, the Germans down, and the Russians out, right? So no, they did allow them to join NATO. So Putin tried to work with the West, and then he realized, well, this isn't going to work. So what are we going to do? We're going to create Rosneft. We're going to create Gazprom. The money made from selling Russian oil and Russian gas is going to go to Russia. We're going to use this to build up our living standards. We're going to use this to get back to where we once were. Instead of being down in the dump where people are poor and starving, can barely read and write, are barely educated. People are dying from illness. People are addicted to drugs. Putin came in and said, no, we're done with that. We're going to stop doing that. We're going to be independent. We don't care if the West likes it or not. We don't care if the West likes us being independent. Let them lie about us. Let them do whatever they want. That's something that people in the West need to understand, is that Russia doesn't care what we think about them anymore, nor should they, right? Obviously, what the West thinks about Russia doesn't matter, right? Like we've said, the leaders in the West want Russia to be down. They want Russia to be poor. They want Russia to be backwards. They want Russia to be starving, right? Who wants that in Russia? No one. No one should want that for any country, right? Every country deserves sovereignty. We shouldn't force any country into poverty and into starvation. But that's what Wall Street, that's what the city of London, that's what they want to do to Russia. And that's what these proxy wars are about, especially in Ukraine. It's very obvious in the one in Ukraine. But if you look at Azerbaijan and Armenia, look at where that's taking place, right? Look at where Georgia and South Ossetia are. We know for a fact that the West would like to break Russia up into smaller states, right? So it's not surprising that they're provoking proxy wars on the western edge of Russia, at Armenia and Azerbaijan, Georgia and South Ossetia. It's not surprising that they're provoking these proxy wars. They're trying to split Russia up. And that's why when Putin talks about using all means necessary to protect Russia, the existence of Russia, right? Putin said in his speech like 2 weeks ago, when he announced partial mobilization, he said that we will use all means necessary to defend ourselves from threats to our existence, right? And in the Western media lied and said he threatened to use nuclear weapons. No, he said that if you threaten our existence, we will defend against that with all means necessary. If you push us to the point that our existence is an imminent threat, imminent danger, then yeah, they will use nuclear weapons. Who wouldn't, right? The United States has used nuclear weapons for far less than that. But right, my point is Russia has very legitimate concerns about threats to their very existence, right? Very legitimate concerns. You saw what was going on in Ukraine, banning the Russian language, committing genocide against the ethnic Russian people of Eastern Ukraine. And they were trying to expand that. They wanted to expand that into Russia. You heard John McCain. I talked about it a second ago. You heard John McCain say, we're going to go on the offensive. Offensive against what? Right? Offensive against Russia. That's what they were talking about. Right? So Russia's not making it up when they say that they have very legitimate threats to their existence, right? We know that the U.S. has biolabs all over the world. Russia and China and other countries have been talking about that for decades, and it came to the forefront kind of for a little bit at the beginning of this conflict, because you had Victoria Nuland, who's now the Undersecretary of State. She was the ambassador to Ukraine that I was talking about. She was testifying in front of Congress, and I believe it was Rand Paul, senator from Kentucky. He asked her, does Ukraine have biological weapons facilities? And Nuland sat there for a second. She said, Ukraine has biological research facilities, right? So yeah, she admitted to it. And you can see Rand Paul, when she said that, was kind of surprised. Like, oh my God, you just told the truth. You just told us, yeah, they do have these, right? And what are those facilities working on? Are they working on vaccines? No, they're not working on vaccines. They were working on bioweapons, right? And Russia has shown us that. It's been covered up in the West. So when I say this, people are like, oh, you're crazy. I've heard nothing about that. Yeah, because they purposely didn't tell you, right? But Russia showed the documents. Russia captured the documents from these research facilities that they captured, and they took the documents to the UN and they showed them to us, and they have the signatures from the American officials, from the Ukrainian officials, that's showing where the money came from, showing what they were researching. They were researching biological weapons against Slavic people, right? They wanted to create a biological weapon that could be used against Slavic people. And by the way, they're not just using research facilities like this against Russia, it's also against China, like I mentioned, everyone else that the US doesn't like. Like I said, Russia and China has been complaining about these research facilities, these biological weapons facilities for decades. And the U.S. covers them up, and they don't give any attention to the UN hearings that are held when Russia and China and these other countries actually show the documents. They say, here are the documents we've captured. They have signatures from Western officials. They have signatures from Ukrainian officials showing exactly what we're claiming. Here is our proof. You can't deny that level of proof. It's beyond a reasonable doubt. But when Wall Street gets to control all the media, when 90+% of all media is controlled, they can cover it up, right? We just won't cover that UN meeting, right? Most Americans have to go to work. They have to go work. They have to make money, or they're going to starve to death, right? That's where they are, right? So they put you in a situation where you can't know the truth, and then they just hide it from you. Even Tulsi Gabbard made a YouTube vlog about the bioweapons labs. Yeah, Tulsi Gabbard is pretty good on some stuff like that. She's not great on everything, but she's good on. Yeah, exactly. You have Americans that are talking about this. Who's the guy? Jeffrey Sachs, right? The economist from like Columbia or something. Very mainstream fellow, very liked for the past multiple decades and elite circles. Now he barely steps over the line. He says, "Oh, well, maybe we did provoke Russia into this. Maybe this wasn't good." And he barely goes against. He goes against the American establishment a little tiny bit, and they freak out. They freak out. Jeffrey Sachs is on the Ukrainian hit list. Do you remember that Ukrainian hit list that Newsweek published? The people that Ukraine would have captured or killed or put into prison, right? Just for saying truthful things. Jeffrey Sachs was on it. Scott Ritter was on it. Caleb Maupin was on it. Tulsi Gabbard was on it, right? So, that's who we're dealing with in Ukraine, right? And the U.S. is backing these people 100%. The CIA, Joe Biden, they're behind Ukraine 100%. And Ukraine doesn't do things on its own. The United States is telling Ukraine what to do. everything. Ukraine fires a missile, the Ukraine told them to fire. Or, I'm sorry. If Ukraine fires a missile, the United States, NATO told them to fire that missile. They told them. They gave them the targeting data. They said, this is where the Russian air defenses are. Here are the windows where you can get through, right? So that's why Russia seems to be being aggressive towards NATO. And once again, on the West, the media frames they don't tell you about things. They lie to you. So then when Putin gives this big speech, they're able to show this speech and say, look, Putin is being aggressive. What have we done? What have we done? We haven't done anything. Well, no, you overthrew Ukraine's government. You've been killing Russians. You've been developing biological weapons to use against Russia. You've surrounded them with offensive weapons. You have nuclear weapons in Germany. Actually, you have nuclear weapons in Turkey, and you have nuclear weapons throughout the world surrounding Russia, right? That's what's really going on. But they'll tell you, look, we've done nothing because we haven't told you. We haven't told you about any of this, so we can say we've done nothing, and now Putin is threatening to use nuclear weapons. He's saying that there's Nazis in Ukraine. What Nazis in Ukraine? We haven't talked about Nazis in Ukraine, right? So they just lie. They lie, and they lie, and they lie, and they distort reality. And that's going to lead to nuclear annihilation, folks. I mean, that's where we are. I don't mean to sound like a doomer, but that's where we are, right? If we continue down this road, everyone is going to die, right? 7 billion people are going to die if we continue down this road. We have to let these countries have sovereignty. Russia deserves sovereignty. China deserves sovereignty. Iran, Iraq, North Korea. Right? Everyone deserves sovereignty. That's not a hot take. How do you think it will end and when? I assume you're talking about the conflict in Ukraine. The conflict in Ukraine, I think it will end when Russia gets these troops that they just mobilized, trained, right? 370,000 more. 300,000 that they've mobilized, and they report that they have 70,000 more volunteers. So once they get those men trained and armed and deployed to the battlefield, maybe they end up doing that with more. But around this winter, I would expect a large offensive from the Ukrainian or from the Russians, and I would expect this war to be over by next summer. I mean, I'm just basing this off of what I hear from other people that I follow and respect. I would expect this war to be over by next summer, by the start of next summer. Right. Once Russia gets these men mobilized, it's going to be massive. It's going to be massive. They're going to be able to roll through with mobilized infantry, and they're going to be able to take whatever they want to take, and get rid of the Ukrainian government and military that exists. At some point, Zelensky is going to have to go. Right. At some point, Zelensky and his government are going to have to go. Who knows how that will be? Maybe he flees to his $10 million villa in Miami, or however much they say it's worth. Maybe he does that, or maybe like Scott Ritter said when I interviewed him, maybe they take the what did he call it, the 45-cent solution or the 75-cent solution, which was a 9mm bullet to the back of the head. Maybe they take that route. Maybe someone kills Zelensky. At some point, though, there's going to have to be a government change in Ukraine, and that could come one of many ways. Maybe the Ukrainian military itself does it, a coup of sorts. Maybe the Russians kill Zelensky and his people around him. I don't know, but at some point they're going to have to go. And Russia is going to come through with this mobilized force that they have, and they're going to be able to take whatever they want. The Ukrainian military has already been largely destroyed. It's been reconstituted now, though. It's been reconstituted by a huge amount of arms and mercenaries from the West flowing in. But that can only last for so long. There's only so many mercenaries in the world, and we hear back. Some of these mercenaries are coming back. They've came back from the fight, the ones that have survived. And they say, it's horrible over there. A lot of these Ukrainians are poorly trained because many of the professional soldiers have been killed, and the professional soldiers that remained are being kept in reserves. The people that are fighting on the front lines are largely just people that were conscripted. And it's a bad picture that every Western mercenary that comes back paints. So I don't see the mercenary stream lasting forever. And once Russia mobilizes these men, they'll be able to take huge amounts of land, and they'll be able to wrap this up quickly. Hopefully, the sooner it's wrapped up, the better for everybody. The better for Russia, the better for Ukrainians, the better for us. Right? The threat of nuclear annihilation goes down quite a bit once this conflict is wrapped up, and unless the United States wants to start another one, which they're trying to in Taiwan. But that would be my answer. I think this probably ends around sometime next summer. And I think it ends by Russia using a massive military force, a massive offensive to take parts of Ukraine, Odessa, Kharkov, maybe more. I don't know. I don't see them taking all of Ukraine. I think at some point there'll have to be a peaceful settlement. We already see officials from the EU saying, okay, we're ready. Joseph Borrell said if the right situation comes about, then we could accept a negotiated end. So it just depends on what will that right situation be, right? Europe is going to be devastated, right? What's the date today? It's October 10th. It's October 10th. I live in the middle of America. In the last couple of nights, it's been cold. It's been into the 30s the last couple of nights. It's pretty cold. Now, obviously, it's going to get colder. It's going to get down into the 20s and into the teens and into the single digits, and eventually it'll get to 0 and below. And that's going to be the case in Europe as well, right? It's going to get very cold in Europe. Europe isn't going to have a lot of gas. They're not going to have a lot of electricity. And the European people are not going to want to keep funding this. They're already not. We're already seeing it. If you follow me on Telegram, which you should go do, the link is in the bio. I've been covering the protest in Europe, and they're very large already, and they're just going to get larger, right? As more and more people lose their jobs, lose electricity, they can't afford to heat their homes, right? People at first people were talking about they'll have to choose between eating or heating. Well, now it's looking like they might not have either, right? They might not have a lot of either, because once the electricity goes out, how do you keep the food cold? How do you store meat? How do you store frozen food without electricity? You can't. I need to take a drink of water. Read some of these comments here. Okay, let me scroll up a bit. Our friend with the alphabet's name I can't read. I'm drawing a blank of what you said your name was again. I'm sorry about that, but thanks for watching. You said fun fact. Somebody said fun fact. I've been saying for decades I want to go in a nuclear explosion and leave a really bitchin' blast shadow. Well, that's not good, right? You're not going to leave much of a really bitchin' anything. It turns concrete to dust. I don't think nothing will be left of you or anyone. Slow grind, minimalizing own casualties, etc. Yeah, that's what the Russians have been doing. I think they might turn it up once they get those men armed and trained, the men that they're mobilizing. I imagine it'll turn into less of a slow grind and more of an offensive style. I think you can view it in full screen if you open Telegram in a browser, not in the app. Oh, okay. Thank you. I'll try that next time. Thank you, Dragon Stakovich. Cool name. Zelensky may be dead already. I don't think so. I don't think he is. I think, but I see what you mean, right? No, but he might be a dead man walking. That's what I was saying, right? He might be alive right now, but he might not be in a few months, right? Somebody's going to. Those are the two options for Zelensky at this point. He either dies. Who knows how he dies? Maybe it's his own military. Maybe it's the CIA around him. Maybe it's himself. Who knows? Maybe he does too much cocaine and dies that way. Who knows? But Zelensky is going to die. I guess everybody will, but Zelensky is either going to die or going to go somewhere else, right? He's either going to die or resign and go live in his villa in Miami. Those are kind of his options. There is no, I don't see a peaceful end. I don't see an end to this conflict that doesn't involve Zelensky either fleeing, dying, or being in prison. I don't see how it doesn't happen. Russia isn't going to allow him to just live freely, so he'll have to flee. If he flees to Miami or wherever the hell he wants to go in the West, then he has a chance. But if he decides to stay in Ukraine, then I wouldn't if I was him, right? What I interviewed Scott Ritter, I think the first time he compared Zelensky to a capo, were they called capos? The people in the concentration camps who were prisoners in the concentration camps, but they got treated a little better because they did a lot of the facilitating, they did a lot of management, they moved people around from chamber to chamber. That's what Zelensky is. Right? The people will say there's no Nazis in Ukraine because Zelensky is a Jew. Well, Zelensky is a Jew that's being forced to work for Nazis, right? He's an actor. He's a cokehead actor who's being forced to work for Nazis. This is a fact. He's harmless. Someone has to start repaying the billions for the next 5 centuries. And winter of discontent beyond measure. Yeah. Especially for the poorer parts of Europe. For Ukraine, which was already the poorest part of Europe. That's what really sucks. If you're a Ukrainian civilian and you just saw these Russian strikes destroy our energy infrastructure, what happens when it gets colder, right? It's already starting to get cold. So beginning of October, at least where I am, it's starting to get colder. What's going to happen when it gets really cold? What's going to happen when it gets to 10 degrees Fahrenheit? I don't know where you guys are from watching. Whenever I say degrees, I'm talking about Fahrenheit because I'm a stupid American. But, what are you going to do when it gets very cold? Very, very cold outside, right? You don't have any electricity. How are you going to heat your homes? It's going to be very cold. A winter of discontent beyond measure for the poor parts of Europe, for sure. For even the richer parts of Europe, very, very bad. And the United States, it's not looking great for us either. OPEC Plus cutting oil production. The USFU, the whole EU. If EU does not have brains, then F all of the EU for good, together with the US government. Yeah, I don't blame you for holding that opinion. Okay, so here's a winch. Republicans win bigly next month. Biden is impeached and convicted by January. The government is already subsidizing the power by $50 a month for the next 6 months. For the next 6 months, the winter of our discontent. They'll poison Zell with Novichok and blame the FSB. Oh yeah, I didn't consider that. Maybe. Yeah, maybe they'll kill Zelensky and try to blame it on Russia somehow. Interesting, right? He's a hostage, poor fool. Yeah, exactly. I think that when Zelensky ran, he ran on that peace platform. He said, "I'll end the bombing of Donetsk and Lugansk. I'll stop all that." And obviously, he just continued it. But we did see in the beginning of his presidency, he went to the Azov battalion, and he went to the head guy, big fella, and he went up to him and he's like, "You have to stop." And you can look this video up online. He says essentially, "You have to stop." And the Azov guy starts, "Well, we can't because of this, because of that." And Zelensky goes, "No, I'm the president of Ukraine. I'm ordering you to stop. I'm your commander in chief." And you can see this guy; he's not taking Zelensky serious, and you can tell by the look on Zelensky's face and the tone that he's getting very upset. And the guy doesn't listen to him. And obviously they didn't. I don't know what happened to Zelensky. Maybe he was bullshit from the very beginning. That's very, very possible. I mean, he was some actor comedian, right? It's not hard to turn an actor, right? Actors aren't very smart people. We see that in the United States. They're idiots. Capo is a slur. Oh, well, I'm sorry. I didn't know that. I forget the term that they use for those people in the concentration camps. But yeah, I'm sorry. But maybe you're right, Dapper. Maybe they'll poison Zelensky and say the FSB did it. They'll use Novichok, right? Right. What they say that they used on what's his name? I'm drawing a blank on his name. I've been talking for a while, but the guy what was his name? Alexei Navalny, right? They say that Putin poisoned him with Novichok because he was gonna take over. He was gonna get elected over Putin. Meanwhile, he had like 2% support in Russia, if that, something smaller than that, right? Very fringe guy Navalny is. But yeah, maybe they will. Maybe they'll poison him with Novichok, 1980 Soviet nerve agent. Say, look, Russia used their 1980 Soviet nerve agent to kill Zelensky, right? And then, of course, if anyone asks a question, they'll be canceled. But my first question would be, why'd they do it in such a cloak and dagger way, right? You're at war with Ukraine. You're at war with Ukraine. The war is continuing to escalate. Just drop a missile on them. If you want to kill the leaders, drop a missile. Why won't the Russians just do that? I'm sure anyone that asked that question will be canceled, but we're used to that. We're used to that, are we not? That's MI6 for literal Nazis. Good show. Thank you, Neil. Azov is now characterized in the mainstream media as formerly associated with far-right ideology. Is it really? Is it really? Slur used by other Jews against the Jews that capitulated. The capos were Jews. Okay. So was I right, though? Was I right? And that's what they call them? I didn't know it was a slur, but didn't the leader of Svoboda get assassinated? I don't know. I'm sorry. They will be eating grand massacres brought down on the 12th story apartment to the community burn barrels on the streets of Lviv by February. This is the worst outcome. Russia sans gloves. NATO has Novichok to sand. Yes, Dapper. Okay, yeah, I thought they were capos. I see where that's a slur, right? If I was in a camp with other Jewish people and some of my fellow Jews decided to work with the Nazis, I'd probably have a slur for them as well. I don't know about the leader of Svoboda being assassinated. That's an interesting question. I don't know. If anybody has any information on that, feel free to comment it below. Well, I've ran out of things to talk about a bit. I mean, obviously we could go on and on and on, but only so much in one day, right? I would expect, to the person that asked how will it end, I would expect once Russia gets these people mobilized, we'll start seeing a quicker end to it, right? 200,000 is all they had before for a special military operation. We're going to see that expanded, right? That's what Russia's saying. We'll see that special military operation expanded. But we have to avoid nuclear annihilation, truly. Truly, I'm not being a doomer when I say that. We really, really, really have to avoid that. Scott Ritter said he saw a video of Chechens fighting a Ukrainian column. Does someone have the link? I'm sure there's videos out there. I don't know if it's recent. I shared a video on my Telegram, but let me try to share the Telegram on the browser, like somebody mentioned. It's a very good point. I never considered that. Okay, I'm already logged in. Good. One second. Okay, let me share my screen again. There is an interesting video I shared the other day on here of a. Oh, let's talk about this guy real quick. I completely forgot about this. What is his name? Zladkov. To any Russians watching, please forgive me. I'm a stupid American. I don't know how to say these words or names. But he's been put in charge of the special military operation, pretty much. This fellow right here. And you can come down here and you can read. He's largely accredited as the sole reason why the Syrian government was able to regain its territories from ISIS. He does not believe in retreats and does not favor surgical approach to strikes. In Syria, we noticed that his approach was rather go big or go home. Huge aerial bombardments were his thing. He's also rumored to be next in line to eventually retire, to eventually take over for the guy who's currently ahead of the general staff, chief of the general staff of the Russian armed forces. So this is official. He has taken over since this was shared, and that's very interesting. And like we saw today, those strikes weren't very surgical. They were precision, obviously, because they're precision guided munitions, but they were large, and that's how I think this conflict is going to end. This guy like this is going to come in. They're not once they get these additional 370,000 men armed and trained and deployed. We're going to see the Russians stop retreating. We're going to see them stop retreating. We're going to see large-scale aerial bombardment, and we're going to see the end of the conflict that way. That's how we're going to see the end of the conflict. Unfortunately, Russia's strategy so far of minimizing Russian casualties while maximizing Ukrainian casualties, it's worked for the most part. It was working until the Ukrainian counteroffensives, but that was good enough to liberate Donbass. That strategy is good enough to liberate Donbass and Zaporozhye and Kherson. But if you want to liberate more of Ukraine, you're going to need more forces, and you're going to have to stop retreating, right? You can't keep going. Then they're counterattack. Then we have to retreat because we don't have the forces. That's not going to keep working. But I'm going to show this video of an ambush here on Ukrainian troops, and I thought it was an interesting video to watch, just because how often do you get to see the POV of a receiving end of an ambush? But I'm going to show this. If someone in the comments could let me know if you can see and hear it in full screen, that would be great. I hope you guys are able to see that. I thought that could be an interesting video. I see somebody asked, we'll go back here and I'll stop sharing the screen. Somebody asked, what is your opinion on the red line, the real one, when Western governments will be forced to stop supporting Ukraine? Is there anything that could stop them? The people of the country, right? Economic despair. That will stop them. We're already seeing that in Europe, right? Germany can't send anymore because they don't have any more arms to send. What do I think the red line is? I think it'll be economic despair and no longer Ukraine existing, right? Once Russia gets these men armed and trained and deployed, and once they finish the operation, there's not going to be much more of a Ukraine to support. They could try to arm guerrilla groups, but I don't think they will. The West is in for a bad spot. The West has made a bad bed for themselves. meaning that high energy prices, high food prices. It's going to be bad, very bad at home. The people of those countries aren't going to go for it. Now, obviously, Wall Street is much more powerful than the people of these countries. But once you get into crisis, true crisis, once people start missing meals, once people can't heat their home, once people are dying, once people in hospitals are dying because there's not enough electricity to support the hospital, once that starts, the chaos will be severe. Right. If you follow me on Telegram, which you should, link is in the bio, you've seen the protests I've been covering in Europe, and they're large, and they're already large. Imagine how large they're going to be when everybody starts missing meals. Well, not everybody, the rich will, but when most 90% of people start missing meals, when they can't heat their homes, there's no electricity in the home. That's when the West is going to have to stop. If NATO isn't really a thing in a year, that wouldn't surprise me. You have Greece and Turkey on the verge of going to war, two NATO members. So that's the red line, right? Biden and London and the United States. London and England are the two that are supporting this the most. They'll stick to it as long as they can, and the United States will be able to stick to their guns of supporting Ukraine longer than Europe, right? The United States is not going to get it as bad as Europe is going to get the fallout from this. But I'd say that's the red line. I say that's what the United States will stop. Is once there's really not much more of a Ukraine that exists, once Zelensky is either fled or gone somehow, that's when they'll stop. When there's not much more to support. Europe is going to stop sooner. Europe's already stopping because they don't have that much more to send, and they're about to die. Gluten protein, yeah. Solid stream, by the way. Nice, thank you. Why would Russia move on Poland? Yeah. Oh, they're saying that would be a red line. A red line for what? For NATO to enter the conflict? I mean, NATO's already entered the conflict, right? They're not actually sending American. Well, they are sending mercenaries with American patches and British patches and French and Polish patches. But no, Russia's not going to go into Poland. I shouldn't have really even acknowledged that, right? Russia is not trying to conquer Europe. That's kind of a Western talking point you have right now. Russia's very clear about their objectives. They want to denazify and demilitarize Ukraine. Now it looks like that they tried to do that for 8 years diplomatically. Now they're having to do it militarily, and Ukraine, every arm that was sent to Ukraine made it harder on Ukraine, right? Every single Russian that dies is going to be Russia is going to extract more of a toll from Ukraine. More of Ukraine will become Russia for every Russian that dies. And at this point, I don't see much of a Ukraine existing in 10 years. Right? You want to go 10 years down the road. Let's go 1 year down the road. I would imagine Odessa and Kharkov are a part of Russia, just like Donetsk, Lugansk, Kherson, and Zaporozhye are right now. You go another year down the road. What's left of Ukraine? Right? I don't see a whole lot. They're going to be in economic despair. They're going to have lost their access to the sea. NATO is going to discard them. Right, the United States and England, as soon as Ukraine stops being useful to them, they're going to throw them to the side. That's what they're going to do. And at that point, what does Ukraine have left? Not much. Maybe Poland themselves comes in and takes the rest. Right. Much of Western Ukraine used to be a part of Poland. Poland actually still thinks that it should be a part of Poland. So maybe that happens. I don't think I see Russia taking all of Ukraine. All right, at the end of this conflict, I don't think it's all going to be Russia. I think most will, especially eastern and southern Ukraine and Kharkov. But I don't think they're going to go to Kiev. I don't think they're going to go all the way to Lvov. I saw a map the other day on the election of the last election in Ukraine. It's Svoboda, the Nazi party in Ukraine. They got the most votes in the Lvov area. So I don't know if Russia would even want that in their territory. And also, not to mention, every piece of territory that's being added, it's not easy. It's not easy to just add all these people and all these cities to your country, right? So I don't think Russia wants that mess. I don't think Russia wants to increase their border with NATO necessarily. But I don't see them going all the way to the Polish border, right? The Polish border with Ukraine. I don't see all of Ukraine becoming a part of Russia. Like I said, east and southern Ukraine, and then whatever's left, it will be in economic despair. And at some point, I would imagine Poland will get some of the territory of Ukraine too. Will have Scott Ritter on soon, hopefully. believe it's been about 3 weeks since I had him on. I try not to bother him. He's obviously a very busy guy, but yeah, I'll probably email him in the next week or so and see if he can come back on at some point. Hopefully he does. U.S. bombers in Finland and Sweden to protect them while the admission into NATO is underway, so Russia wouldn't burst over the border. Fear-mongering galore. Yeah, we'll see if they actually become a part of NATO. Turkey is going to stay out of the way. NATO has an interesting policy where every NATO member country has to be in favor of a new country joining. Now, of course, NATO or Turkey said that they wouldn't vote in favor of either Sweden or Finland. But it looks like the U.S. has pulled Turkey back into its sphere. But they've cracked the whip, if you will, on Turkey and said, you either start doing what we want or you're going to start to suffer as well, because we've seen that Turkey has suspended the use of the mirror payment system, the Russian payment system. I think the U.S. will continue cracking its whip on Turkey. I don't know what exactly the U.S. has on Turkey, but clearly it's enough because Turkey is being obedient and listening. And we'll see what happens. I saw it was either yesterday or 2 days ago. Turkey said that they'd be willing to vote for one of the Nordic countries, Sweden or Finland. We'll see. Maybe Sweden, right? Because if I'm correct, Sweden doesn't actually border Russia. Finland borders Russia. Sweden doesn't. I believe I'm correct in that. Correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, Russia's not going to be happy about it, right? Remember why Russia launched this operation. The true reason why Russia launched this operation, not bullshit propaganda. The true reason is because Ukraine was turned into a hub of Russophobia, of Nazism and anti-Russian thought, actually killing Russian people, banning the Russian language, making Nazism a part of your government, recognizing Stepan Bandera as your national hero, right? Stepan Bandera, according to the Ukrainian constitution, is George Washington, right? What George Washington is to Americans, or what Vladimir Lenin is to Russia, that's what Stepan Bandera has become for Ukraine. He's a Nazi, right? He's a Nazi. You can't have that. People of both countries are in actual fear of the potential, even imminent invasion, mass madness. Yeah, that's absurd. That's absurd. Do they really think a mass invasion is just going to start like that, right? It's typically a buildup. Typically, you have to have a buildup. But yeah, no. If I was a citizen of Finland or Sweden, I'd be very much against joining NATO. Right? NATO is nothing but an offensive organization that is bringing the world closer and closer to nuclear annihilation. And that's a fact. I don't see how you disagree with me. Even NATO people agree with that statement. I saw somebody tweeted the other day, NATO is a suicide pact, and some pro-NATO person quote tweeted it and was like, yes, and we're proud. Right? So they're even admitting to it. So, hi, Kitty. Yeah, I wouldn't want to join either if I was Finland or Sweden. That's probably not good for anyone, right? The bigger NATO is, the closer we are to nuclear annihilation. Remember that. We have to avoid that. Russia's government has said they're committed to avoiding that. We need a United States government that is. Joe Biden's not. I know Joe Biden gave that speech at the UN 2 weeks ago where he said we must avoid it. He doesn't even know what he's saying, probably. But also, he's just trying to paint Russia as the nuclear aggressor. He's trying to make it seem like Russia is being aggressive. You heard what Putin said. He said he'll use all weapons necessary. Yes, to defend them from threats to their existence, just like you would, Joe. Any country would do that. And another thing that annoys me in the West is they say Putin said this. Putin does that. What will Putin do? What will Putin do? What will Putin do? They act like Putin is some type of dictator. No, Russia has a very legal process. Honestly, it's harder for Vladimir Putin to declare war than it is Joe Biden or Barack Obama or Donald Trump. Right? Look at what Barack Obama did in Libya. Right? Just destroyed Libya. Took Libya from Libya was the most prosperous country in Africa, and now has literal slave markets. So Barack Obama, who is of course supposed to be great because he's the first black president, he literally returned slave markets to Africa. Open slave markets to the most prosperous country in Africa. Barack Obama, the first black president, did that. Right? And he did that with no congressional approval. There was no vote. There was no referendum by the people on whether we should go destroy Libya. There was no vote in Congress on whether we should go and destroy Libya. He just did it because the United States president can effectively declare war without any type of congressional approval. Vladimir Putin can't do that, right? Vladimir Putin had to, the state Duma, essentially Russia's Senate, had to pass a bill allowing the special military operation. And they confined it to a special military operation. They didn't declare war. They said, you can't go to war, but you can have a special military operation. And Americans should understand that. A lot of Americans hear that and they automatically go, oh, that's bullshit. That's bullshit. You, right? Whether you call it a special military operation or an invasion, it's still an invasion. No, Americans should understand this very well, because the United States of America, you know how many times they've declared war since World War II? Since World War II, how many times has the United States declared war? Zero times. Everything they've done, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, blah, 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 Yugoslavia, name the country. They've classified everything as an intervention. So American, if you're pro-American, if you back the U.S. and everything it does, you should understand that there's a difference between invasion and something else, whether it be an intervention, which is an invasion. The U.S. was bullshitting the world into invading countries. But whether it's an invasion or a special military operation, right? And according to Russian law, a special military operation could only have so many troops, like it was 200,000. The Russian law limited Vladimir Putin and the Russian military to what they could do in Ukraine. That's changed. We saw that 2 weeks ago. What did the State Duma do? They passed a bill saying partial mobilization. And what did Putin do? He signed it and issued the partial mobilization order. So Putin didn't just wake up one day and go, I'm going to issue partial mobilization. No, the State Duma had to pass a bill and then he had to sign it. It's very bureaucratic, right? More bureaucratic than the United States. It's harder for Vladimir Putin to go to war than it is Joe Biden. If Joe Biden wanted to go to war right now, you know what he could do? He could pick up the phone and say, hey, Mark Milley, Joint Chiefs of Staff, I want you to bomb here. What's Mark Milley going to do? Well, he might go, well, Mr. President, if Joe Biden says, no, you're going to do it, I'm the commander-in-chief, I'm going to fire you. I'm going to find someone else to do your job if you don't. Mark Milley is going to do it. They're going to press the button, and they're going to do it. Right? Right? It's easier for the American president to declare war than it is for Joe Biden. Or, I'm sorry, than it is for the Russian president to declare war. I'll leave it at that. Fear the tremendous opportunity. Bornholm is without power. Do you think it was done by Russia? Sweden doesn't allow Russia to investigate the Nord Stream pipeline. I don't know about Bornholm. I assume it is no, I don't think it's because of Russia. I don't think Russia knocked out power in a single Swedish city. I don't think that. Yeah, and Sweden won't allow Russia to be a part of investigating Nord Stream because they don't want them to find out the truth that the United States or the British blew it up, right? Whether it was the United States or the British, it doesn't matter. It was the United States, right? So, yeah, no, they're not going to let Russia investigate because they don't want to find the truth. They want to say, right, Russia blew up their own pipeline. Russia bombed the prison that they were holding people that they intended to put on trial, right? Russia bombed their own nuclear power plant. Russia bombed their own bridge, and Russia bombed their own bridge going over the Kerch Strait. No, that's absurd. It's so stupid. Come up with a better lie. You know what I mean? Come up with a better lie. Come up with a better lie. Why can't they come up with a better lie? Why does it have to be so fucking infantile, all of it? Come up with something better if you're going to lie. Do you plan to invite any guests from Russia to your stream to get a first-hand source on what's going on in their economy and internal affairs? Yeah, I'd love to do that. I'd love to do that. If anyone has any suggestions on people that they'd like me to invite on, I'd definitely do that. That sounds like a great idea. I'd love to do that. Operation Noble Anvil, bringing the Serbs to heel as if we are dogs. I'm not familiar with that operation, but yeah. The United States is very hostile towards Serbs. We know that. Right? We talked about those biolabs developing biological weapons that target Serbs, right? Please comment if anyone has suggestions on anyone I should contact, see if they'd like to come on and give a firsthand report on what's going on with Russia's economy and how Russian people feel. And that'd be great. If anyone has any suggestions, I'd love to do that. But yeah, let's see. It is 2:12 p.m. where I am. Looks like we've been going for about an hour and a half. It's been a good stream. Thanks for watching. I think I should probably wrap up. I mean, I'm sure somebody could get me going on something else if they wanted to, but just a racket to longer billions, harvest minerals, organs, train ISIS, the usual. Yeah, right. The United States created ISIS. Right? There you go. You got me started on something else. The United States created ISIS, and then they fueled ISIS, and then they acted like they defeated ISIS. Right here in the U.S., Obama and Trump and all these people like, we're fighting ISIS. No, you're not. ISIS was winning, right? ISIS was winning the war in Syria. They were going to take over Syria. They were going to overthrow the Syrian government. What was the United States doing when ISIS was on the march towards Damascus? Excuse me. When, one moment. Right, when ISIS was winning and they were on the march towards Damascus and they were going to win, what was the U.S. doing? Were they striking? Like, the U.S. has all types of military infrastructure all around Syria. Were they using that military infrastructure to bomb those convoys of ISIS? No, they weren't. They were going to let ISIS win because that's what the point of ISIS was. The United States created ISIS so that they could overthrow the Syrian government. They wanted Bashar al-Assad out because they want the oil. They want the wheat, right? The United States occupies like 10% of Syria. You know what that 10% of Syria has? Like 90% of Syrian oil, right? Every day there's convoys. You can look it up. There's videos of American convoys, military convoys, carrying out truckloads and truckloads and truckloads of Syrian oil, right? Literally stealing Syria's wealth, right? People think of Syria and they think of Syria as being a poor country because the people are poor. Syria has massive wealth, right? Syria is sitting on a huge amount of oil and natural gas that the whole world would buy, right? Syria is a very rich country, really. It's the people that are poor, and the people are poor because the United States is keeping them in that state. They're not allowing Syria to develop. When Syria did begin to develop, what did the United States do? They created ISIS. Go and overthrow this government. We can't have that. We'd rather have an ISIS government than an independent Syrian government, right? And what did Russia do? They said, no, we have close relations with Syria. We've had close relations with Syria for decades. We're not going to let you overthrow this government. We're not going to have an ISIS-controlled country. No. Russia entered the war, and they beat ISIS. Russia defeated ISIS, right? The United States did not defeat ISIS. Every now and again, the U.S. would carry out an airstrike on a leader that started to go against the United States, right? Because these people have their own these people that the United States put in charge, these terrorist organizations, they have their own mind, right? They're independent people, right? The United States hates independent people. But even these people are somewhat independent. They do what the United States does in exchange for arms and training and whatnot. But eventually they're going to want to go their own way. And what does the U.S. do? They kill them. When they do that, boom, he started to go his own way. We killed him. Remember Trump? They sent the dogs after him. They literally sent the dogs after that guy. And I think Trump gave a Medal of Honor to a dog. Because apparently he killed the guy. He chased him and caught him and killed the guy. And it was funny because in that same press conference when Trump is like praising this dog for killing this terrorist, which I don't care about the terrorist. Good, he should be dead. He's a terrorist. But they finally kill a terrorist, and Trump at the press conference is praising this dog, and then he calls the terrorist that they just killed a dog. He's like, he was a dog and he died like a dog. Well, aren't you praising him? Whatever. It was stupid. That's a side point. But yeah, Russia destroyed ISIS. Russia moved in and they bombed those ISIS convoys that we were talking about. The guy that I showed a moment ago that's now in charge of the special military operation in Ukraine was in charge of that. And we see what his MO is, right? His MO is large scale strikes. We saw that today, right? Or this morning. He's only been in charge of the operation for a couple of days, and we're already seeing his strategy, right? Large scale aerial bombardment. But anyways, yeah. The United States wanted to destroy Syria. They created ISIS. ISIS was winning. They were going to let ISIS win, but then Russia said no. And now we hear in Western media that like Russia invaded Syria and like Russia leveled Idlib, right? Russia leveled Syria. Russia destroyed Syria. No, Russia saved Syria. There's only two countries. That's the Syrian government, the Syrian Arab Republic. There's only two countries that their government has asked to come in, right? And that's Russia and Iran, right? Russia and Iran, they've asked for military forces from Russia and Iran to be there to help them. They have not asked for United States or British troops, but who are there? United States and British troops are still there. Stealing the oil, stealing the wealth, keeping Syria poor. Right? The United States likes these countries when they're poor and when they're starving and when American companies like Shell, Exxon, BP, well, BP's British, Chevron, they like when they like when Wall Street, the city of London, get to control countries and the countries are left poor and starving. They don't like independent countries. Good stream, man. Thank you for watching. I think I'm going to wrap it up. Like I said, we could keep going over and over. You can get me started on something else. I'm going to wrap it up for today, I think, unless anyone has anything else they want me to comment. If you liked the stream, like, subscribe, turn on the notifications bell if you want, or just like and subscribe. But, I should be streaming pretty consistently now that I moved in where I'm at least every other day. So subscribe, like it. Follow me on Twitter and Telegram. Really follow me on Telegram. I like Telegram quite a bit. I'm very active on there. The link is in the bio, or is in the description. But if you just go to Telegram and you look up Bradley Wasser, you should be able to find me. It's the same profile picture as on here. And same with Twitter, but just use the link that's in the description if you want to follow me. But anyways, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, follow me where you can. I hope you guys have a great day. Also, comment any Russians you guys like me to have on, right? Somebody mentioned if I'd have on Russian guests to have a first-hand report. I'd love to do that. Please comment if you have any ideas. Have a great rest of your day or night or wherever you are. Follow me on Telegram. I'll continue to cover the special military operation there. Have a good night. Let's avoid nuclear annihilation. Okay, I'm going to end on that. We have to avoid nuclear annihilation. Keep it in the forefront of your mind. Make sure you make other people aware of how close we are. We're so close, man. It's very, very stressful to think about. We're so close. We have to avoid it. We can't let billions of people die. Nuclear annihilation happens. Everything on Earth dies. Right? Be provocative when you tell people about this, too. Make sure they understand the severity of nuclear conflict. But anyways, thanks for watching. Avoid nuclear conflict. Have a good night. Have a good day, wherever you are. Follow me wherever you can.